He slammed his body against the front door so hard, the old wood frame cracked, because on the other side stood two armed men who had come to drag a woman out of his home in the middle of the night. He had no weapon, no backup, no plan, just a Navy man's refusal to move. What he didn't know yet, what would only become clear by morning, was that the terrified woman shaking behind him wasn't just a stranger caught in a storm. She was one of the most powerful people in the country, and she was about to change his life in ways he never saw coming. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss what happens next. The last customer of the night had left without paying. Not the first time. Probably wouldn't be the last. Joel Carver pulled the grease rag from his back pocket, wiped his hands for the third time, and stared at the empty bay where a '09 Silverado had been sitting for 2 days. Owner said he'd be back by 5. It was nearly 8. Shop was closed. Rain had started coming sideways off the coast an hour ago, and the wind had that particular bite to it, the kind that didn't just chill you. It got inside your bones and reminded you exactly how thin your walls were. He locked up anyway. What else was he going to do? Joel Carver was 36 years old, 6 feet even. Hands like a man who had spent the better part of his adult life either fixing engines on Navy destroyers or hauling them apart in a garage that barely broke even. He had a jaw that hadn't seen a proper shave in 4 days, eyes the color of winter water, and a way of walking that people noticed, not cocky, not aggressive, just deliberate. A man who moved like every step was a decision. He drove home in the rain with his windshield wiper on the passenger side half broken, which meant he leaned slightly forward the whole 18 minutes back to the Ridge Road, squinting through the blur the way he'd learned to squint through a lot of things in his life. Just push through. Just keep going. Deal with what you can fix and let the rest sit. The house was small. Smaller than the place he and his wife Sandra had rented in Norfolk when he first got out of the service. Smaller than most of the places he'd lived since. 3 rooms technically, one of which was barely bigger than a walk-in closet, but Mia had covered every inch of the walls with drawings. Horses, stars, a purple whale she'd named Gerald, so it felt like the richest room in the house. He checked on her first thing. Always did. She was asleep on her side, one arm thrown around a stuffed bear she'd had since she was 3. Her dark hair was a mess across the pillow. He stood in the doorway for maybe 10 seconds, just looking at her the way parents do when the rest of the world gets very quiet and very simple. 8 years old. She still believed her father could fix anything. He wasn't going to be the one to tell her otherwise. He moved to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Stared into it. Closed it. Opened the cabinet above the sink and found half a box of crackers and a can of soup he'd been saving for Mia's lunch tomorrow. He put the crackers back and took 3 of them with him to the couch instead of opening the can. 3 jobs. That was his life right now. The shop during the day, technically his boss's shop though. Ray had started calling it our shop lately when he wanted something. Then 2 nights a week, he drove freight for a warehouse company 40 miles inland. And on Saturdays when Mia was with his neighbor Dolores, he did maintenance work for a property management company that handled rental units in 3 different counties. He was never not tired. He had forgotten what it felt like not to be, but the bills were still behind. The mortgage on this house, a place he'd bought during the brief optimistic window right after getting out of the Navy, when he thought things were going to go differently, was 3 months in arrears. He'd gotten the certified letter last week. He'd put it in the kitchen drawer with the others. There was a particular kind of exhaustion that wasn't physical. He knew it well. It was the exhaustion of doing everything right and still losing ground, of working harder every month and watching the numbers go the wrong direction anyway, of knowing with a cold certainty that lived just below the surface of every waking moment that one emergency, a medical bill, a transmission, anything would tip the whole thing over. He ate his crackers, listened to the storm. Then Mia's voice came from the hallway. "Daddy!" He was up before she finished the word. She was standing at the edge of the hallway in her socks and her pajamas, with the little stars on them holding the bear against her chest. her eyes wide and fixed on the front door. "What is it, baby?" "Someone's knocking," she said. Really hard. He heard it then. He had been so far inside his own head he'd tuned it out. 3 fast knocks. A pause. 3 more harder, like whoever it was had moved from asking to begging. He crossed the room and put his hand on Mia's shoulder. "Go back to your room. Leave the light off." "Daddy, it's fine, just go on." He waited until he heard her door close, then he moved to the front door and looked out the side window. At first, he only saw the rain. The porch light was struggling in the wind, swinging slightly, and the darkness beyond it was absolute. Then, lightning moved across the sky offshore, and for 1 second, everything was white, and he saw her, a woman, young, alone. One hand pressed flat against the door, the other arm wrapped around herself. Her coat, dark, expensive, looking the kind, with a structured collar that cost more than his truck payment, was soaked completely through. Her hair was plastered to her face. She wasn't looking at the door anymore. She was looking back over her shoulder at the empty highway, like she was waiting for something to come out of the dark. He unlocked the door and opened it. The wind came in immediately cold and sharp, carrying the smell of salt and pine. The woman turned fast when she heard the latch, and for a half-second, she flinched back genuine fear, the kind that lives in the body before the brain gets involved. And then she looked at him. Her eyes were dark brown and completely alert, despite everything the way eyes get when adrenaline has burned through all the normal filters. "Please," she said. Not dramatically, just cleanly, the way people talk when they've run out of everything except the truth. "I just need to get out of the rain. I won't be any trouble. I just need somewhere to wait." Joel looked past her. The highway was empty. No headlights anywhere. "Wait for what?" he said. She hesitated. "For the storm to let up." He looked at her for another moment. Then he stepped back from the door. "Come in." He gave her a towel and a dry flannel shirt he'd washed but not yet folded, and she took both without making a performance of it. He put the kettle on. She sat at the kitchen table and said nothing while he moved around the small space, and he gave her that silence without making her feel watched. He didn't ask her name. Not yet. He'd learned in 8 years of military service that when someone is running scared, the fastest way to close them down is to start demanding information. You let them breathe first. You let them feel safe enough to exist in the room. Then, if they wanted to talk, they would. She talked. "My name is Claire," she said. He nodded, put a mug of tea in front of her. "Thank you. I'm sorry to show up like this. I know how it looks." "It looks like someone got caught in a bad storm," he said, sitting down across from her. "That's all." She looked at him with something careful in her expression, like she was measuring the sentence for something hidden inside it. When she didn't find anything, some of the tension in her shoulders released maybe a 1/4 inch. "Is it just you here?" she asked. "My daughter," he said. "She's asleep." "I won't wake her." "You won't." She wrapped both hands around the mug and stared into it. He noticed several things without making a project of noticing them. The ring she was wearing on her right hand, not left, looked like it cost more than his house. Her nails were professionally maintained, but 2 of them were broken freshly, like she'd grabbed something hard and fast. There was a thin cut on her forearm she hadn't mentioned, and it wasn't deep, but it wasn't nothing either. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. She didn't answer it. It buzzed again almost immediately. And then again. "You can use the phone if you need to call someone," he said. "I've got a landline." "I don't need to call anyone." "Okay." The kettle had gone quiet, but the storm hadn't. Rain hammered the roof and the wind pushed against the windows with that low moan it makes when it's serious. Joel got up and added a log to the wood stove in the corner. The fire was down but not out. He coaxed it back without fuss. He heard Mia's door open. She came down the hall barefoot and stopped in the kitchen doorway. 8 years old, with sleep-creased cheeks, and her stuffed bear hanging from one hand, staring at the stranger at the table with zero fear and considerable curiosity. "Hi," she said. The woman looked up. Something changed in her face. Not performance, something else. A softening that seemed involuntary. "Hi," she said back. "I'm Mia." I'm Claire." "You're all wet," Mia said matter-of-factly. "I know. I got caught in the rain." Mia considered this. Then she crossed the kitchen, climbed up onto the chair beside the woman, and held out the stuffed bear. "This is Captain," she said. "He's good if you're scared." The woman stared at the bear. Her jaw moved slightly. She took a breath through her nose that was slightly too careful to be casual. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Captain sounds like exactly who I need right now." Mia nodded, satisfied. Then she looked at her father. "Can I have water?" "Get back to bed first. I'll bring it." "Daddy." "Mia." She sighed, the exaggerated sigh of someone who has been asked to do a reasonable thing and finds it deeply unreasonable. But she slid off the chair and padded back down the hall. At the doorway, she turned back to look at the woman once more. "You can keep Captain for tonight if you want," she said. "He doesn't mind." Then she was gone. Joel got up and filled a glass of water from the tap. Mia's door clicked shut. He carried the water down the hall, knocked twice, handed it through the cracked door. "Is she okay?" Mia whispered. "She's fine. She just got caught in the rain." "She looks sad." "Get some sleep." "Daddy." "Yeah." "You did a good thing letting her in." He didn't say anything to that. He closed the door gently. When he came back to the kitchen, the woman called Claire had her elbows on the table and her face in her hands. She wasn't crying. She was doing that thing people do when they are trying very hard not to cry, and have been doing it for long enough that the effort itself has become exhausting. He sat back down. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said. "But if you need to talk, I'm not going anywhere." She lifted her face, looked at him. "Why are you being this kind?" she said. "You don't know me." "No," he said. "But you knocked on my door in a storm and you looked scared. That's enough." She studied him for a long moment. "My name isn't Claire," she said. "I know," he said. She blinked. "Your coat," he said, nodding slightly toward the rack where he'd hung it. "Monogram on the interior pocket, VL." She closed her eyes briefly. "You didn't say anything?" "Wasn't my business. Most people—" She stopped herself, tried again. "Most people would have asked." "I'm not most people," he said, not like a boast, just a fact. She looked at him for another long moment. The storm pressed against the house. The fire crackled low and steady in the wood stove. "My name is Vivian," she said finally. "Vivian Laurent." Joel said nothing, just waited. "I think I'm in a lot of trouble," she said. "Okay," he said. "You don't recognize my name." He shook his head. "Should I?" She let out a breath that almost became a laugh, but didn't quite. "No," she said. "Actually, no. It's kind of the best thing anyone's said to me in months." Outside, somewhere down the highway, a set of headlights appeared, moving slow. Too slow for the storm. Moving like someone was looking for something. Joel watched them through the window. They stopped at the base of the ridge road, sat there for a full minute, engine running. Vivian had gone very still. "Are those the people you're running from?" he said quietly. Her hands tightened around the mug. "Yes," she said. The headlights sat a while longer. Then slowly they moved on. Joel exhaled through his nose. He stood up, moved to the window, watched the taillights disappear around the far bend. Then he went back to the table, sat back down, looked at the woman who had just told him her real name. "Tell me what's going on," he said. And she did. She talked for almost an hour. The man she was engaged to, a man named Adrian Cross, who had come into her company 2 years ago presenting himself as a visionary partner, had spent those 2 years carefully, methodically dismantling the trust she'd built into her business and replacing it with corruption she couldn't see. He had used her company's government contracts, her name, her digital signatures on documents she'd never fully read to broker illegal arrangements with defense contractors, military energy systems, classified infrastructure bids, money moving through shell accounts with her company's fingerprints all over them. She had found out the previous afternoon. A junior systems analyst named Priya, whom Vivian had personally mentored, had come to her office with a flash drive and shaking hands and said, "I need you to see something, and I need you to not tell anyone I showed you." What was on that drive had taken Vivian's entire world view and turned it over like a car on ice. Adrian hadn't just been stealing. He had built a parallel paper trail designed to point directly at Vivian when everything came apart. Every fraudulent signature led back to her. Every laundered transfer had her authorization code on it. He had spent 2 years constructing a version of events in which she was the criminal and he was the witness. By the time she'd processed what she was looking at her personal assistant, a woman named Dana, who'd worked for her for 3 years, had stopped returning her calls. When she called Adrian, he didn't answer. When she walked to the corridor outside her office, 2 men she didn't recognize were standing at the elevator. "Security," her deputy had said. "Mr. Cross sent them up." She had walked to the bathroom, called no one, texted her driver 1 word. "Not tonight." Then she'd taken the stairwell down 14 floors, walked out through the loading dock, and started moving. She'd been moving ever since. "How long ago was that?" Joel asked. "About 9 hours. And the men in those SUVs? Adrian's private security team. He has 6 men on rotation. Former contractors. Armed." She met his eyes. "Yes." Joel was quiet for a moment. "And you came up here because—" "I drove until the storm made driving impossible. My phone battery was at 4%. I pulled over on the Ridge Road and started walking, and your light was the only one I could see." He looked at her. She looked back at him. "Okay," he said. "Okay. You're not going back out in that storm tonight. The guest room is—" He glanced back down the hall. "It's Mia's art room. There's a cot in there. It's not much." "It's more than enough," she said. And she meant it in a way that had nothing to do with the cot. He stood and moved toward the hall. Then he stopped. "For what it's worth," he said without turning around. "He picked the wrong person to do this to." She was quiet for a moment. "How do you know that?" she said. "You just met me." "Because you ran," he said. "Someone who was guilty would have stayed and managed it. You ran, which means you were scared, which means you still have something left in you worth protecting." He went to check the locks on the windows. The storm didn't stop until nearly 4 in the morning. Neither of them slept much before then. Joel was up at 5:15, same as every morning, because his body had long since stopped needing an alarm. 12 years in the Navy will do that to a man. You wake up before the world asks you to, because in his experience the world rarely gave you time to adjust before it started demanding things. He moved quietly through the house, checking on Mia first. Still asleep, 1 foot hanging off the edge of the cot, then down the short hall to the art room, where he'd set up the guest cot the night before. The door was cracked. He listened. Steady breathing. Good. He put the coffee on, pulled on his work boots, and sat at the kitchen table with a pen and the back of an envelope doing the math he already knew by heart. The mortgage payment he couldn't make. The electric bill that was going to disconnect notice territory by Friday. The transmission fluid he'd been nursing along in the truck because a full flush was $60 he didn't have. He wrote the numbers down anyway, the way a man pins a wound, not because it changes anything, but because looking at it directly is better than pretending it isn't there. He heard the art room door open at 6:30. Vivian came down the hall in his flannel shirt and her own slacks. From the night before, her hair pulled back, her face scrubbed clean of whatever had been left of her makeup. She looked different, without all of it, younger, more tired, more real. She stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at the envelope on the table. He turned it over without making a show of it. "Coffee," he said. "Please." He poured a second mug and set it on the table. She sat down across from him and wrapped both hands around it, same as she'd done the night before with the tea. And he got the sense that was just how she operated, like she needed to hold something warm while she figured out where she was. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "A little." She paused. "Did you—" Enough. That was a lie. He'd sat up until 3 watching the road, and even after he'd finally lain down, he'd kept one ear tuned to the front of the house. Old habit. In the Navy, you learn to sleep in fractions, always part of you still listening. "You were watching for them," she said. Not a question. "Just being careful." She looked at him over the rim of her mug. "You could have just told me to leave." "Yeah," he said. "I could have." "Why didn't you?" He thought about it for a moment, not performing the thinking, actually turning the question over. "Because my daughter was watching," he said. "And I didn't want her to grow up thinking that's what you do when someone needs help." Vivian was quiet. She looked down at her coffee. "Her mother," she started carefully. "Is she—" "Gone," Joel said. 3 years ago. She left." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was the right thing for everyone, even if it didn't feel that way at the time." He took a sip of his coffee. "Mia doesn't remember much. She asks sometimes. I tell her the truth that her mom needed a different life than the one we had. That it wasn't about her." "Do you believe that?" He looked at her directly. "I believe Mia needs to believe it. So yeah, I do." She held his gaze for a moment, and something in her expression shifted. Not pity, nothing condescending, just a kind of recognition. Like she was filing that away somewhere. They heard the small crash from Mia's room, followed immediately by Mia's voice. "I'm okay." Joel stood up automatically. "You sure?" Gerald fell off the shelf. "He's fine." Joel sat back down. Vivian's mouth curved slightly. The first thing approaching a smile he'd seen from her. It changed her face entirely. "Gerald," she said. "Purple stuffed whale," he said. "Very important member of the household." "Of course." Mia appeared in the doorway 2 minutes later, fully dressed in the way only an 8-year-old can be fully dressed. One sock pulled up, one pushed-down shirt on backwards hair, not even approached yet. She looked at Vivian with the pure, uncomplicated acceptance of someone who had not yet learned to be suspicious of people. "You stayed," she said. "I did," Vivian said. "Good. Are you hungry? Daddy makes eggs." "Mia," Joel started. "Do you like eggs?" Mia pressed, climbing onto her chair and planting her elbows on the table. "I do," Vivian said. "He burns them sometimes, but they still taste good." "I have never burned eggs in my life," Joel said, getting up and moving to the stove. "The time with the cheese," Mia said pointedly. "That was a different situation entirely." "They were black on the bottom, Daddy." "They were caramelized." Mia looked at Vivian with the gravity of a witness presenting evidence. "They were black." Vivian laughed, a short, surprised sound like it came out before she had a chance to decide whether to let it. She pressed her fingers to her mouth, right after almost embarrassed by it. Like laughter was something she'd temporarily forgotten how to do, and her body had done it without permission. Joel cracked 4 eggs into the pan and said nothing, but he'd heard it. He made breakfast with what he had, which wasn't much. Eggs toast from a half loaf of bread, the last of the butter. Orange juice from a carton that was technically 2 days past its date, but still fine. He put Mia's plate in front of her first, without thinking about it the way he always did, and gave her the bigger portion without making it obvious the way he always did that too. Vivian watched him do both things. She didn't say anything about it, but she saw it. After breakfast, Mia went to the art room to draw, and the two of them sat with their second coffees in the small quiet of the kitchen while the morning light came gray and thin through the window, the storm having finally worn itself out sometime around dawn. "I need to make a call," Vivian said. "My real security team, not Adrian's people. They've been trying to reach me since last night. I've been afraid to use my phone, because it can be tracked, but I need to tell someone where I am." "You can use the landline," Joel said. "Can't trace a landline to a GPS coordinate." She looked at him. "How do you know that?" I worked comms on a destroyer for 4 years, he said. You learn the difference between what can be found and what can't. She nodded slowly. I'll keep it short. Take as long as you need. She made the call from the kitchen while Joel checked on Mia. He could hear the murmur of her voice, controlled, precise, giving information without emotion, the way people talk when they're used to being listened to in rooms where emotion is a liability. Whoever was on the other end was clearly relieved. There was a brief back and forth that he caught fragments of. No, I'm fine. No, don't send anyone yet. I need a few more hours. Because I said so, Daniel, that's why. Then a longer silence, then quieter. No, I'm safe. Someone helped me. Another pause. No, nobody you'd know. She came back to the kitchen doorway. My team knows where I am. They're standing by. Good, Joel said. They want to come now. I told them to wait. He looked at her. Why? She seemed to think about how to answer that. Because, she said finally, the moment they show up, all of this. She gestured vaguely at the small kitchen, the crayon drawings on the refrigerator door, the cracked linoleum, and the mismatched mugs. All of this becomes something else, and I'm not ready for that yet. He understood that, without needing her to explain further. He nodded and stood up. I've got to call my boss. I missed the opening shift at the shop this morning. He said it plainly without self-pity because that was just the fact of it. 3 jobs, and he'd missed the start of one. He made the call in the hallway. His boss, Ray, answered on the second ring. You're late, Ray said, which was Ray's version of, are you okay? Storm took out the road for a while. I've got a situation at the house. Situation. Family thing. A pause. You want me to dock you the morning, or you coming in this afternoon? I'll be in by noon. Fine. But Joel... Ray's voice dropped slightly. The Harmon account called again. Said if the truck isn't ready by Thursday, they're taking their business to Shelby's. Transmission's waiting on the part from the distributor. I know that you know that Harmon doesn't care. Just get in when you can. He hung up and stood in the hallway for a moment. Thursday. The part was supposed to arrive Wednesday. It would be tight. Everything was always tight. That was just the shape of his life. Every timeline a fraction too short. Every margin too thin. Every day, a careful calculation of what could wait and what absolutely could not. He went back to the kitchen and found Vivian standing at the refrigerator with the door open, not taking anything, just looking. You're almost out of everything, she said. I know, he said. Grocery day is Friday. She turned and looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not pity, he'd been on the receiving end of pity enough times to recognize it, and this wasn't it. It was more like she was recalibrating something inside herself. Can I help? She said. With the groceries. With anything. I'm just sitting here taking up space and you've got a life to run. You're not taking up space, Joel. It was the first time she'd used his name, and she said it simply without decoration. I'm a person who is used to solving problems. Sitting still while other people manage things on my behalf makes me feel insane. So please, let me do something useful. He looked at her for a moment. Mia's been asking me to fix the latch on her art room window for 2 weeks, he said. I keep not having time. There's a toolbox in the hall closet. She blinked, then she almost smiled again. I can probably manage a window latch. I figured. She went to fix the window latch. He heard her and Mia talking in there for a while, Mia narrating the purpose of each drawing on the wall with the complete seriousness of a museum docent, Vivian asking questions with what sounded like genuine interest. He heard the screwdriver working. He heard Mia say, "You're pretty good at that." And Vivian say, "My first job was helping my uncle fix things on weekends." He said no one should ever have to depend on someone else for something they can learn themselves. A pause. I think I forgot that for a while. He didn't go in. That conversation wasn't for him. But he stood in the hall for a moment longer than he needed to. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "We know she's on the ridge. Last chance to be smart about this." He stared at it. Then he typed back, "Wrong number," and blocked it. He went to the front window and looked out at the road. Nothing. Just wet asphalt and the kind of morning quiet that sits wrong when you know it won't last. He went back to the kitchen and sat down with the envelope he'd turned face down earlier. He unflipped it, looked at the numbers, added them up the way he'd done 100 times. The answer was the same as it always was. He was 2 months behind on the mortgage. He'd managed to pay the electric, but the gas was coming due. Mia needed new shoes. Her left one had developed a split along the sole he'd been patching with a rubber adhesive that wasn't going to hold much longer. He was thinking about the shoes when Vivian came back to the kitchen doorway. "Latch is fixed," she said. "Also, I think Gerald may have sustained minor injuries in a fall, but Mia has assured me he is emotionally resilient." "That tracks," Joel said. She came in and sat down, glanced at the envelope. This time he didn't turn it over. She looked at the numbers for a moment without speaking. "I'm going to say something," she said carefully, "and I want you to hear the whole thing before you respond." "Okay. I know you didn't help me because you wanted anything in return. I know that because I've spent 10 years in rooms full of people who help you specifically because they want something, and I know exactly what that looks like. And you don't look like that." She met his eyes. "But I also know that you are working 3 jobs and still losing ground, and that is not a reflection of who you are. That is a system that is tilted against people like you, and I want to help if you'll let me." "Vivian, the whole thing," she said quietly. "You said you'd let me finish." He closed his mouth. "I'm not talking about charity," she said. "I'm talking about—" She paused, choosing her words with precision. "I have resources, more than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. And I have a daughter. I mean, I have Mia in my kitchen drawing horses." She caught herself. "She's your daughter. But she gave me her stuffed bear last night because she didn't want me to be scared. Do you know how long it's been since someone did something like that for me without expecting anything back?" Her voice had gone slightly unsteady at the end of that sentence. She steadied it. "I'm not asking you to accept anything right now," she said. "I'm just asking you not to close the door on it before you've thought about it. That's all." Joel looked at the envelope. He looked at her. "I appreciate what you're saying," he said slowly. "And I'm not saying no. I'm saying I don't take things I haven't earned." "You earned it last night," she said. "You just don't think protecting someone counts as earning something." He didn't have an immediate answer to that. He was still turning it over when Mia appeared in the doorway holding Gerald and announced that she was hungry again, and the conversation broke apart, the way kitchen conversations do when an 8-year-old enters the room, and Joel got up to find her something to eat. And Vivian sat at the table and helped Mia finish a drawing of a whale that Mia had decided needed a captain's hat, and the morning moved on in the small, ordinary way mornings do, even when everything underneath them is charged and complicated and not yet resolved. But that evening, just after 4 o'clock, Joel heard the low thrum of engines on the ridge road and looked out the front window. 3 black SUVs moving slow. They weren't passing through. They were stopping. Joel said one word. Just one. "Mia." And the way he said it, quiet, flat, with zero panic in it, was exactly the tone he'd used in the Navy when a situation was moving from manageable to serious, and everyone needed to stay functional. It wasn't a scared voice. It was a decided voice. Mia looked up from the kitchen table where she and Vivian had been working on the captain's hat whale drawing. She read her father's face the way children read parents faster and more accurately than most adults give them credit for. She got up without being asked and went down the hall. "Close your door," Joel said, "and stay away from the window." "Daddy." "It's fine. I just need you in your room right now." She went. The door clicked shut. Joel turned to Vivian, who had already stood up from the table. She was looking at the front window. Her jaw was set. She'd gone very still in the way people go still when their body is deciding between fight and flight and hasn't committed to either yet. "How many men does he typically run?" Joel said. "Rotation of 6. SUVs seat 4 comfortably, 3 if they're loaded with gear." She spoke without hesitation. Whatever fear she was carrying, she'd organized it. He won't have all 6. Not for something like this. He'd want it quiet. So 3, maybe 4. Most likely. Armed. Always. Joel moved to the hallway closet. He pushed aside the toolbox and the spare blankets on the top shelf and came out with a lockbox. He keyed it open. Inside was a Beretta M92 magazines fully loaded, his service weapon from his last deployment. He'd kept his license current because it was one of those habits that costs almost nothing to maintain and might someday cost everything not to. Vivian watched him check the chamber seat, the magazine, and set the safety all in about 4 seconds with the automatic efficiency of someone who had done it 10,000 times. "You know how to use that," she said. "Yes." "Have you ever had to?" He looked at her. "Yes." She absorbed that. They're not going to negotiate, Joel. Adrian's people, they don't negotiate. They manage. That's the word he uses. They're here to manage the situation. I understand what they're here to do, he said. They're not going to do it. You could be arrested, charged with obstruction interference. I could, Guy, he said. But they'd have to get through my door first. This isn't your fight. He stopped and looked at her directly. You knocked on my door. You slept under my roof. My daughter gave you her bear. He said it without heat, without drama. It became my fight around 2 in the morning when I was watching the road so you could sleep. Vivian opened her mouth and closed it again. Call Daniel, Joel said. Your security team. Tell them it's time. They're 40 minutes out. Then we need 40 minutes. He moved to the front window and looked out at a slight angle, keeping himself back from the glass. 2 of the SUVs had pulled off the road onto the gravel shoulder. The third was idling at the base of the ridge road. Doors hadn't opened yet. They were waiting for something, maybe a signal from whoever sent that text earlier, maybe just letting enough time pass to be sure. His phone buzzed on the kitchen table. He picked it up. Unknown number. He answered it. Mr. Carver. The voice was professional, unhurried, the voice of a man who was accustomed to being on the winning side of conversations before they started. You've had a house guest since last night. We'd like to collect her and be on our way. No one needs this to be complicated. Who is this? A man with a lot of patience and a little bit of a schedule. Is she in the house? I don't know what you're talking about. A short pause. Mr. Carver, you drove a 10-year-old pickup truck to work this morning and came home with a coffee stain on your jacket. You have a daughter in elementary school and a mortgage that is significantly past due. You are not a complicated man, and this is not a complicated request. Just put her on the road, and we all go home. Joel let that sit for a moment. Tell your boss, he said, that whoever he's looking for isn't here. And tell him if those vehicles don't move off my property in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to be on the phone with the county sheriff, the state police, and every local news outlet that covers this county. Mr. Carver. 5 minutes, Joel said, and hung up. He set the phone down. His hands were steady. Vivian had been listening. She was watching him with an expression he hadn't seen from her before, not fear, not calculation. Something closer to disbelief. They know your name, she said. They knew it last night. They ran your plates, Joel. They know about the mortgage. They were threatening you. I know what they were doing. Most people. She stopped herself. Tried a different approach. Anyone with good sense would hand me over right now. I mean that. You would lose nothing. They would go away, and your life would go back to normal. My life was already a mess before you knocked on my door, he said. That's not a reason to do the wrong thing. She stared at him. You're not afraid of them, she said, and it came out sounding less like an observation and more like something she was trying to understand from the inside. I didn't say that, he said. I said they're not going to get through my door. The headlights on the first SUV came on. Joel watched. The vehicle stayed where it was, but the lights were on now, aimed straight at the house. The second SUV did the same. It was a pressure tactic, simple, crude, and effective against most people. Flood the front of the house with light, make the occupants feel exposed, and watched create the psychological sensation of being surrounded. Joel pulled the front curtain closed. "Go to Mia's room," he said. "Stay away from the windows on the south side. I'm not going to hide in a child's bedroom while you stand here alone." He turned and looked at her. "I'm not asking for your help with this part. I'm asking you to keep my daughter company so she's not scared. That's the job I need you to do right now." Something moved across her face. She understood what he was doing, not dismissing her, but giving her the assignment that actually mattered. "Okay," she said quietly. "Keep your phone on. The moment Daniel calls you, answer it." "I will." She moved toward the hall. At the doorway, she stopped. "Joel." He looked back at her. "Don't do anything that gets you shot," she said. "Please." "Planning on it," he said. She went. He heard her knock softly on Mia's door, heard Mia's voice, heard the door open and close. Then the house was quiet, except for the sound of his own breathing and the engines idling outside. He dialed the county sheriff's non-emergency line, got a dispatcher named Helen, whom he'd spoken to exactly once before when someone had backed into his mailbox. He told her there were 3 unidentified vehicles on his property, with occupants who had made what he would describe as a coercive telephone contact. And he had a young child in the house, and he would appreciate a patrol swing-by when they had someone in the area. Helen said she'd pass it along. He didn't expect a car in the next 30 minutes. He knew how these things worked. But the call was logged, and a logged call changed the calculus for people who were trying to keep things quiet. 4 minutes later, the front door took 3 hard knocks. Not the desperate pounding of the night before. These were deliberate, measured. The knock of someone who expects the door to open. Joel stood in the front room with his hand at his side, the Beretta holstered against his hip under his flannel. He breathed once evenly, the way his chief petty officer had taught him before any situation that required absolute clarity. Then he opened the door. 2 men. Both large, both dressed in the kind of dark tactical clothing that was trying not to look like tactical clothing and failing. The one in front had a square face and the flat professional calm of someone who hurt people for money and had learned to feel nothing particular about it. The one behind him was younger, more watchful, keeping his eyes moving. "Mr. Carver," the one in front said, "we'd like to come in." "No," Joel said. "Just that. No." The man's expression didn't change. "We have reason to believe there is a person on this property who requires medical attention. We're here to help." "There's no one here who needs your help." "Sir, if you'll just allow us to—" "I'm going to be very clear with you," Joel said, and his voice was quiet enough that both men had to pay attention to it. "You are standing on private property without invitation or legal authority. You have made coercive contact by telephone. I have a child in this house, and I have already been in contact with the county sheriff. I am asking you one time to step back to your vehicles and leave this property." The man studied him. His eyes moved to the slight bulge at Joel's hip and came back up. "You're making a serious mistake," he said. "Then it's mine to make," Joel said. "Step back." Neither man moved for a moment. It was the kind of moment that has weight, a full pause, where everyone in it understands that what happens next matters. Then the younger one spoke quietly to the one in front. Joel caught 2 words, "police scanner." The man in front held Joel's gaze for 3 more seconds. Then, without another word, he stepped back off the porch. The younger one followed. They didn't go to their vehicles immediately. They stood on the gravel drive, and the man in front made a call speaking too low to hear. Joel stood in the open doorway and watched them without expression. He didn't close the door. Closing the door would have looked like retreat. He just stood there in his own home in an old flannel shirt, looking like a man who had already decided. He heard Mia's voice from down the hall. "Daddy?" "I'm here, baby." "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Stay with Vivian. She's teaching me how to play a card game." "Good." He kept his eyes on the men outside. The call ended. The man in front turned and looked back at Joel one more time. There was something in his expression now that hadn't been there before. Not quite respect, but a recalibration. The recognition that the man in the doorway was not going to move. Not for threats, not for money, not for the logical argument that this was someone else's war. They got in their vehicles. The SUVs pulled back from the gravel shoulder, made a three-point turn on the ridge road, and moved back down toward the highway. Joel watched until their taillights disappeared around the curve. Then he closed the door, locked it, and leaned his back against it. He stood like that for a moment alone in the front room in the quiet, and let the adrenaline begin its slow, ugly retreat from his system. His hands were still steady. His breathing was even. But his legs, if he was being honest, felt like they were made of something considerably less solid than usual. He pushed off the door and went to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, drank half of it standing at the sink. He heard footsteps in the hall, and Vivian appeared in the doorway. She stopped when she saw him standing there with the glass. "They left," she said. "For now." "For now," she repeated. "Meaning they'll regroup." "Meaning they made a phone call before they left, so somebody knows this didn't go the way they planned." He set the glass down. "Which means you need your team here. Now. Not in 40 minutes now." She was already dialing. She got Daniel on the first ring and said exactly 3 sentences. "Change of plans. I need everyone here in 20 minutes. Yes, I'm sure." She hung up and looked at Joel. 18 minutes, she said. "Daniel drives fast." "Good. Are you all right?" He considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Yeah," he said. "You?" "I've been teaching an 8-year-old gin rummy for the past 40 minutes, she said. "She cheats, by the way, expertly." "She absolutely does," he said. "She learned it from me." Something cracked open between them in that moment. Not romantic, not yet, but real. The kind of thing that happens between two people who have just been through something together and are now standing on the other side of it, both slightly altered. Vivian crossed the kitchen and stood beside him at the counter. Not close enough to touch. Just close enough that he was aware of her presence, the way you're aware of heat from something warm nearby. "He's going to say I planned this," she said. "Adrian. When this goes public, and it will, he's going to say I staged a disappearance to cover my own involvement, that I went into hiding to buy time. He's been building that narrative for weeks. I can see it now looking back. Can you prove otherwise?" "The flash drive Priya gave me is in my car. My car is in a ditch about 2 miles from here, which is where I left it when the road got too bad to drive." She paused. "That drive has everything. Transaction records, forged authorization signatures, shell account routing information. If Adrian's people find it first..." "They won't find it first," Joel said. She looked at him. "You don't know where my car is." "No," he said. "But you do. And you're going to tell Daniel the second he gets here, and he's going to get there before anyone else does." She was quiet for a moment. "You think like a military person," she said. "I was a military person." "I mean, you think in terms of objectives," she said. "Most people in a situation like this would be thinking about the danger. You're thinking about the mission. The mission is keeping you safe and getting you what you need to fight back," he said. "That's it. That's the whole thing." She looked at him for a long moment. He could see her working through something, some internal calculation that involved more than tactics. "Why?" she said, and the word was genuine, not rhetorical, not dramatic. Just a real question from a woman who had spent a very long time in rooms where people only helped you in order to receive something back. "Why does it matter to you I'm a stranger? I showed up on your porch in the rain and you have enough problems of your own." "Vivian," he said. She stopped. "My daughter watched me open that door last night," he said quietly. "And she's going to remember what I did. That's the only reason I need." Vivian looked at him. The kitchen light was low and warm, and outside the road was dark and empty, and somewhere down the hill, Daniel was driving fast on a wet highway. She didn't say anything else. But something in her face had changed, something that had been held carefully at a distance for a long time had moved a few inches closer. Mia appeared in the hallway in her socks holding Gerald. "Is it time for dinner yet?" she asked. "Almost," Joel said. "Are the scary men gone?" He looked at her. "Yeah, baby, they're gone. She nodded matter-of-factly, as if this confirmed something she'd already decided. Then she looked at Vivian. "I want a rematch," she said. "And I want you to know I was not cheating." "You absolutely were," Vivian said. "I was improvising," Mia said with great dignity. And somehow impossibly in the middle of everything, Joel laughed. Daniel arrived in 16 minutes. 3 vehicles, not black, not tactical. Nothing that announced itself pulled quietly onto the ridge road and stopped short of the house with the kind of practiced discretion that told Joel immediately these were not the same kind of men who'd been on his porch an hour earlier. They moved with purpose, but without aggression. Professionals doing a job for someone they actually worked for. Daniel himself was about 50 compact with gray at his temples and the careful eyes of a man who had spent a career reading rooms. He shook Joel's hand at the door with a firm, brief grip and said, "Thank you for keeping her safe." Just that. No excess. "She's inside," Joel said. "She needs to tell you about her car." "I know about the car. We found it 20 minutes ago." He pulled a small hard case from inside his jacket. "Drive was still in the glove box. We have it." Something in Vivian's shoulders released when Daniel said that a tension Joel hadn't fully realized she'd been carrying since she'd mentioned the flash drive 3 hours ago. She closed her eyes for just a moment, and when she opened them, she was already moving forward. "The routing files," she said. "The ones with the defense contract signatures." "Forensics team has them," Daniel said. "They've been working since this morning. We have enough." "Enough for what?" "Enough for a federal referral. Our attorneys filed a protective disclosure 2 hours ago. Adrian Cross's legal team has already received notification." He paused. "He knows it's over. He just doesn't know how to stop it yet." Vivian absorbed that. She nodded once slowly, the way someone nods when they've been waiting for a particular piece of news for so long that receiving it feels less like relief and more like the slow unclenching of something deep. "Good," she said. "We need to move you tonight," Daniel said. "Secure location. Our team has secured the perimeter here, but—" "I know," she said. "Give me a few minutes." Daniel nodded and stepped back outside to coordinate with his team. Vivian turned and looked at Joel, who was standing at the edge of the front room with his arms crossed, not intruding on any of it but not disappearing either. Just present. The way he'd been present since the moment she'd knocked on his door. "It's over," she said. "Or at least the worst of it is." "Good," he said. Same word she'd used. He meant it the same simple way she did. She looked around the small front room. The crayon drawings on the refrigerator visible through the kitchen doorway. The worn couch. The wood stove. The pair of small boots drying by the door. Mia's with the cracked left sole he'd been patching. She looked at those boots for a long moment. "Where's Mia?" she said. "Put her down about 20 minutes ago. She made it to about the 3rd hand of gin rummy before she crashed." Vivian smiled at that fully this time, not the surprised half-smile from the morning, but something warmer and more deliberate. "She beat me 4 times, she said. And she was absolutely cheating every single time. She stacks the deck when she shuffles. I've seen her do it. I've never been able to figure out how. She told me her grandfather taught her." Joel was quiet for a moment. "My father," he said. "He used to take her on Saturdays. He passed about 2 years ago. She talks about him like he's still in the room." "Yeah," he said. "She does." The house was quiet around them, in the way houses get late at night, when all the urgent things have been handled, and what's left is just the ordinary weight of living. Somewhere outside Daniel's team moved in quiet coordination. Somewhere down the hall, Mia slept with Captain tucked under her arm and Gerald on the pillow beside her. "I need to ask you something," Vivian said. "Okay. And I need you to not immediately say no." He looked at her. "That's a loaded opening. I know." She turned to face him fully. "When this becomes public, and it's going to become very public very fast, journalists are going to come looking for the story of where I was. Someone will find this house. Someone will find your name." I figured. It won't be comfortable. People will write things. Make assumptions, manufacture a narrative about why a woman like me ended up in a house like this with a man like you. She said it plainly without apology because she was the kind of person who named the difficult thing rather than talked around it. I want you to know that before it happens, so it's not a surprise. All right, he said. That's your whole reaction. What would you like me to say? She exhaled. Most men would be either excited about it or furious about it. I'm neither, he said. People will say what they say. Doesn't change what happened here. She looked at him with that careful expression again, the one she'd been using since breakfast when she was trying to understand him. Like he was something she didn't have an existing category for. I want to do something for you, she said. Not as a transaction, not as payment, just... She stopped herself, started again. You told me last night that you don't take things you haven't earned. I want you to hear me when I tell you that you have earned it. Not because you protected me tonight, although you did, but because the way you live, her voice shifted slightly. The way you talk to your daughter, the way you gave her the bigger portion this morning and pretended you weren't hungry, the way you fixed her shoes at your kitchen table at midnight because new ones weren't in the budget. She paused. I saw that. I see it. Joel said nothing. Something had gone quiet in him. You are doing everything right, she said. And the numbers still don't work. And that is not a personal failure, Joel. That is just a broken system pressing down on a good man. And I have the ability to push back, and I want to. If you'll let me. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, one of Daniel's men walked across the gravel drive and spoke quietly into a radio. What are you talking about? Joel said finally. Not defensive, just asking with the literal directness of a man who needed to know what he was actually agreeing to before he agreed. Your mortgage, she said. It's 3 months arrears. I want to clear it. Vivian, I'm not finished. She held his gaze. There's an auto repair garage on the Harbor Road. It's been empty for about 18 months. I looked it up this afternoon on my phone when you were outside. It used to be a good business. The owner retired, and his family couldn't keep it going. The equipment is still there. She paused. I want to buy it, and I want to put it in your name. The silence that followed that sentence had a particular texture to it. Joel looked at her. His jaw had moved slightly like he'd started to say something and decided not to yet. That garage, he said slowly. You know it. I put in an offer on it 4 years ago, before Mia's mom left, before everything went... He stopped. I had to pull the offer when things got complicated. I know, she said quietly. I mean, I didn't know, but I can hear it in how you said it. He turned away from her, not in anger, and walked to the kitchen window, stood looking out at the dark. That garage was my plan, he said more to the window than to her. My whole plan. I was going to do restoration work. Classic vehicles, Navy veteran stuff, hire some guys who were having a hard time getting back into civilian life. I had the whole thing mapped out. A short pause. Then everything changed and I let it go. You let things go when you have to. You don't have to let that one go, she said. He turned around. Joel. She said his name quietly without pressure. I am worth conservatively $4.3 billion. What I am describing to you is, it's not even rounding error for me. I am not making a sacrifice. I am making a choice about what to do with resources that I have more of than any one person reasonably needs. She took a breath. You opened your door in a storm. You gave me a dry shirt and a mug of tea and you didn't ask for anything. You stood between me and armed men, and the only reason you gave me was that your daughter was watching. She looked at him steadily. That is not nothing. That is not something that should be left unremarked. He was quiet for a long moment. My whole life, he said finally. I've been the guy who handles things himself. Military single dad, 3 jobs, I just handle it. I don't ask for help, and I don't take it when it's offered because taking it always meant owing something, and owing something always meant someone had a hand on you. He exhaled slowly. It's not pride. It's just that's how I've survived. I know, she said. I'm the same. I built everything myself because I didn't trust anyone who offered to help, because in my world, offers always have price tags. She paused. But I'm standing here telling you that this one doesn't. No price tag, no leverage, no expectations. Just, she searched for the word. Gratitude. From one person to another. He looked at her for a long time. Then he looked down the hallway toward Mia's room. Thought about the boots by the door, the cracked sole, the grocery list with things crossed off, the envelope on the kitchen table with the numbers he knew by heart. I'm going to think about it, he said. That's all I'm asking. I mean actually think about it, not politely think about it and then say no. I know the difference, she said, and I'll take it. Daniel appeared in the front doorway. Ms. Laurent, we need to move. Vivian nodded without taking her eyes off Joel for another moment. Then she moved toward the hall. I want to say goodbye to her, she said, even if she's asleep. Go ahead. She went quietly down the hall. He heard her ease Mia's door open, heard the soft sounds of the room, heard Mia's voice, groggy, half awake, say something he couldn't make out. Then Vivian's voice, low and warm, answering. A small laugh from Mia, then quiet. When Vivian came back down the hall, she was carrying something in her hand, a silk scarf, deep blue, that she'd had in her coat pocket. She looked at it for a moment, then made a decision. Will you give this to her in the morning? She said. I tried to put it on her, but she was asleep. She'll probably make it into a horse blanket for Gerald, but I'll give it to her, he said. She handed it to him. Their fingers overlapped for a half second on the fabric. She asked me if I was going to come back, Vivian said. What did you tell her? I told her I didn't know yet. She met his eyes. Is that the right answer? It's an honest one, he said. She said that was okay. She said her daddy always told her that honest is better than easy. He said nothing to that, because it was the thing he'd been telling Mia since she was 5 years old. And hearing it come back to him from this woman in this hallway at this particular moment in his life was more than he knew what to do with. Vivian looked at him one last time. You reminded me, she said, of something I'd forgotten. What's that? She took a breath. That a good man is not a myth. She walked out the front door. He stood in the hallway and listened to the vehicles outside start up one by one and pull away from the ridge road. He listened until the sound of the engines was completely gone and there was nothing left but the quiet of the house and the distant sound of the ocean working against the shore somewhere below the ridge. Then he went to the kitchen and picked up the envelope from the table. He held it for a moment. Then he put it in this drawer instead of leaving it out, which was a small thing, but it was different from what he'd done every other night this week. He wasn't sure exactly what that meant, but it meant something. He checked on Mia one last time before he went to bed. She was sleeping soundly, Captain tucked against her side, a faint smile on her face that children sometimes have in their sleep when something good has gotten into their dreams. He stood in her doorway longer than usual. We're okay, baby, he said quietly to no one in particular, or maybe to both of them. We're okay. He went to bed, and 3 weeks later on a Tuesday morning that started like every other Tuesday morning coffee at 5:15, work boots. The drive down the ridge road, a car he didn't recognize pulled up in front of the house just as he was walking to his truck. A man in a suit got out carrying a leather document bag and said, Mr. Carver, my name is Owen Lassiter. I'm an attorney. Ms. Laurent asked me to deliver these. Joel stood beside his truck with his coffee in one hand and looked at the man. What is it? He said. Documentation for 3 transactions completed this morning on your behalf, the attorney said, opening the bag. Satisfaction of mortgage on this property. Establishment of an education trust in the name of Mia Grace Carver. He pulled out a third envelope. And the title to a commercial property on Harbor Road. He held it out. It's registered in your name as of 9 o'clock this morning, Mr. Carver. The keys are inside. Joel looked at the envelope for a long moment. He thought about what she'd said. Not charity, gratitude. He thought about Mia's boots by the door. He thought about the garage he'd let go 4 years ago. The plan he'd folded up and put somewhere small inside himself so he could keep functioning without it. He took the envelope. "There's also a letter," the attorney said, pulling a smaller envelope from the bag. "Handwritten. Ms. Laurent asked me to make sure you received it personally." Joel took that too. The attorney shook his hand, went back to his car and left. Joel stood on his Ridge Road driveway in the early morning with his coffee going cold in his hand. 2 envelopes he hadn't expected, and the particular feeling of a man whose world has just shifted under him so quietly that he almost didn't notice it happening. He opened the handwritten letter standing right there. Her handwriting was clean and direct, the same way she talked. "Joel, I said I would think about what to give you. And I did. I thought about it for 3 weeks. I kept coming back to the same thing. You didn't protect me because you expected a reward. You did it because your daughter was watching and you wanted her to see what a good man does. So I'm not paying you back. I'm paying it forward to Mia. To the version of you that had a plan and had to let it go. To the veterans you're going to hire when the garage opens, because I know you will, because that's just who you are. Use it well. Don't thank me, just use it well. V." He read it twice. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his inside jacket pocket close to his chest and stood in his driveway for another minute, looking at nothing in particular. Then he got in his truck and drove to the harbor. He wanted to see the garage. The garage on Harbor Road was bigger than he remembered. He sat in his truck in the empty parking lot for a few minutes before going in, just looking at it through the windshield with his cold coffee in his hand and Vivian's letter folded against his chest. The building was weathered but solid, good bones, his father would have said, which was what his father said about anything worth keeping. 2 bay doors, a small office with a window facing the water, a backlot that could hold 8 vehicles if you parked smart. The sign above the door was faded to the point of illegibility, which suited Joel fine because he had his own name for it already. Had always had his own name for it, carried it around for 4 years, like a coin in his pocket. He used the key from the attorney's envelope and went inside. The equipment was there the way Vivian had said. Dusty, some of it, but serviceable. A lift that would need a hydraulic check. A compressor that looked newer than the rest. Workbenches along the south wall with the kind of scarring that meant someone had actually used them for real work, not just storage. He walked the whole space, slowly running his hand along the bench surfaces, testing the floor for soft spots, checking the wiring panel in the back corner. It was good. It was real. It was exactly what he'd planned 4 years ago. He stood in the middle of the empty garage in the early morning light that came through the high windows, and he let himself feel it for a minute without qualifying it or arguing with it or putting it in a drawer. Just felt it. The way you feel something that you had given up on coming back. Then he went back to his truck, drove to the shop, and told Ray he was giving 2 weeks' notice. Ray looked at him across the counter for a long moment. Then he said, "It's the Harbor Road place, isn't it?" "Yeah," Joel said. "You always talked about that place." "I know." Ray was quiet for a moment. Then he stuck out his hand. "You're going to do good work over there," he said. "Just don't take my customers." "Only the ones you don't deserve," Joel said. Ray laughed. It was the most relaxed Joel had felt in that shop in years. The next 2 weeks moved fast in the practical, logistical way that new beginnings always do. Permits, and inspections, and cleaning and ordering, and the specific joy of making a list of things you actually want to do, rather than things you have to do just to stay above water. He called 3 men he knew from his Navy days, men he'd served with and then lost track of in the complicated aftermath of military life. Men who had come home and found that home had somehow gotten smaller while they were gone. He told them what he was doing. He told them he had work if they wanted it. All 3 said yes before he finished the sentence. He told Mia about this garage on a Saturday morning over breakfast. She listened with the particular attention she gave to things she understood were important. "So you're going to fix cars there," she said. "Classic cars mostly, restoration work, and general mechanical. But yes." Like the ones in your magazines. Like the ones in my magazines. She thought about this. Can I come after school sometimes? If you do your homework first. I always do my homework. Mia, I almost always do my homework. Then almost always yes. She went back to her cereal satisfied. Then without looking up, is this because of Vivian? He paused. Partly. I knew she was going to do something, Mia said with the serene confidence of someone who had assessed the situation early and been proven correct. She kept looking at your face when you weren't watching. People do that when they're deciding something. Joel looked at his daughter. 8 years old. When did you get so smart? He said. I've always been smart, she said. You just talk to me like a regular person, so I talk back like one. He didn't say anything to that. He just drank his coffee and felt the specific, uncomplicated richness of that moment, the morning light, his daughter at the table, the future 1 week closer than it had been yesterday. The garage opened on a Thursday in October, 6 weeks after Vivian's attorney had appeared in the driveway with the envelope. Joel didn't do a grand opening, didn't put out a sign or run an ad. He just unlocked the bay doors at 7 in the morning and started working. His 3 Navy guys were already there when he arrived, Marcus showing up first, which was typical. Then Denny, then Sal, who was always technically on time but never early and seemed to regard punctuality as a moral statement rather than a habit. By noon they had 3 vehicles in the lot and a 4th call scheduled for the following week. Word traveled fast in a small coastal town, especially when the word was that the new shop on Harbor Road was run by a Navy vet who did honest work at honest prices and hired men who understood what it meant to come back from something and need to build something new. By the end of the first month, the bay was full. Joel called Vivian on a Wednesday evening after Mia was in bed, sitting in the small office at the garage with the water visible through the window. She answered on the second ring. "How's the garage?" she said. Not hello, not how are you, straight to the thing she actually wanted to know about. He'd noticed that about her, the directness. It had startled him at first. Now it was just one of the things he knew about her. "Full?" he said. "We're booked out 6 weeks. A pause. "That was fast." "Small town. People talk." "How are the guys working out?" "Marcus knows engines like he was born in one. Denny's slower, but his finish work is perfect. Sal complains about everything, but never makes a mistake." He paused. "They're good men. They needed somewhere to land." "So did you," she said quietly. "Yeah," he said. "So did I." There was a comfortable silence between them. The kind that didn't need to be filled. He'd noticed that too, that silence with her wasn't awkward. It was just time that belonged to both of them equally. "How's the other thing?" he said. She knew what he meant. The public thing. The corporate war that had been playing out across financial news and business media for 6 weeks. Adrian Cross's legal team contesting the federal referral. The board of her company fracturing along lines she'd predicted. And a few she hadn't, her own name in headlines every day, in some combination of vindicated and questioned and embattled and resilient, depending on which outlet was writing it and what narrative they'd already decided on. "Ugly," she said. "But moving in the right direction. The routing file evidence is stronger than his attorneys expected. 2 of his board allies have already stepped back. My general counsel thinks we're looking at a full resolution in about 90 days. And after 90 days, I rebuild," she said, simply without drama. "That's what you do." "Yeah," he said. "It is." Another silence. "I want to come up there," she said. "When things settle, if that would be all right." He took a moment before answering. Not because he was uncertain, but because the question deserved a real answer rather than a reflexive one. "Mia has been asking about you since the day after you left," he said. "She made Captain a little badge out of construction paper that says, 'Official loan to Vivian.' She's been saving it." He heard Vivian breathe in. A careful breath. The kind people take when something catches them off guard in a good way. "That child," she said softly. "Yeah. Tell her I'll bring Captain home personally." "I'll tell her." "Joel." "Yeah." Thank you. For calling. You said not to thank you. That was a different thank you. This one is about the call. You didn't have to call. You could have just... She paused. You didn't have to call. I wanted to, he said. That's the only reason. She was quiet for a moment on her end of the line. He could picture her in some clean, expensive room that was nothing like his small office with the water view at some desk stacked with documents and decisions, still carrying the weight of a fight that wasn't over yet. Good night, Joel, she said. Good night, Vivian. She came in November on a Saturday unannounced in the sense that she'd told him she was coming, but not the exact time, which he'd come to understand was how she operated when she didn't want something to feel like a scheduled event. She just appeared a car he didn't recognize, parked on the Ridge Road, and then a knock on the door that was nothing like the desperate pounding of that first night. Just a clean knock. The knock of someone who was arriving, not fleeing. Mia heard the knock first. She ran to the door before Joel could get there, which was typical, and opened it, which she had been told 100 times not to do, without checking first, and stood in the doorway, looking up at Vivian with Captain tucked under her arm. You came, she said. I said I would, Vivian said. You said you didn't know yet. And then I knew. Vivian crouched down to Mia's level. Is that Captain? Mia held him out solemnly. Around his neck was the construction paper badge. Official loan to Vivian, with a small crayon drawing of a bear on it, which had been colored with considerable commitment, if not quite precision. Vivian looked at the badge for a long moment. Can I keep the badge? She said. Even when I give him back. That's why I made it, Mia said. So you'd have something that's his, so you don't forget him. I was never going to forget him, Vivian said. Or you. She stood up and looked at Joel, who was standing back a few feet in the way he always stood back slightly, giving things the room they needed to be what they were. He looked the same as the night she'd first seen him. Same flannel, same careful eyes, same stillness that had startled her when she first encountered it, because she wasn't used to men who were actually still, who didn't fidget or perform, or fill the air with themselves. Hi, she said. Hi, he said. Mia looked between them. Are you two going to hug or just keep saying hi? Mia, Joel said. I'm just asking, she said with great innocence. Vivian laughed. The full laugh this time, not the surprised one from that first breakfast. It filled the small front room and bounced off the crayon drawings and the worn furniture and the mismatched everything, and it sounded completely at home. She stayed for the weekend. She slept in Mia's art room on the same cot she'd used the night of the storm. She helped make Saturday dinner, which she was notably less skilled at than fixing window latches. But Mia was a generous culinary critic and declared the pasta acceptable. On Sunday morning, Joel took her to the garage. She walked every inch of it the same way he had on that first morning, slowly taking it in, touching the bench surfaces. It's exactly right, she said. Yeah, he said. It is. She stopped at the back wall where he'd put up a small framed thing beside the tool rack. She leaned in to read it. It was a quote, just a few lines printed simply on plain white paper in a basic frame. She read it twice. Did you write this? She said. No, he said. My father used to say it. I just wrote it down. The words were, do what's right because it's right. Not because someone's watching. Not because you'll be rewarded. Just because it's right. That's the whole thing. She stood looking at it for a long moment. That's the whole thing, she repeated quietly, almost to herself. That's the whole thing, he said. She turned around and looked at him across the garage, with the morning light coming through the high windows, and the smell of oil and clean metal in the air. And there was something in her face that was completely unguarded. Not the measured, calibrated expression of a woman who ran a billion-dollar company and had learned to keep her interior life behind glass, but just a person standing in a garage feeling something real. I think I want to know you, she said. For a long time. I think I want to keep... She stopped herself trying to say it right. I don't know what this is. I know it's not nothing. It's not nothing, he agreed. I'm complicated, she said. My life is complicated. The next 6 months are going to be loud and public and not easy. I've had complicated, he said. I'm not afraid of it. She nodded slowly. And Mia? Mia already made you a badge, he said. I think she's made her position clear. She looked at him. Then she did something she didn't plan. She crossed the garage, closed the distance between them, and put her arms around him. Not romantically, not with any agenda. Just the embrace of one person who has been alone inside their own situation for a very long time, reaching toward another person who understands that exact feeling. He put his arms around her, and they stood like that in the middle of the garage for a moment that had no category except real. Then she stepped back and straightened herself and said, "Don't let me burn the toast tomorrow. I did it again this morning, and Mia's been very patient about it." "I'll handle the toast," he said. "Good," she said. "You handle the toast, and I'll handle Adrian Cross, and we'll call it a fair division of labor." He smiled. Deal. By December, she had won the corporate case. The federal referral had moved faster than her attorneys predicted, partly because 2 of Adrian's own former associates had cooperated with investigators, rather than go down with him, and partly because the routing file evidence was exactly as clean and damning as Priya had known it was when she'd walked into Vivian's office with shaking hands and changed everything. Adrian Cross was removed from all company positions, and 3 of his board allies resigned the same week. Vivian stood in front of her company's assembled leadership on a Tuesday morning and said in her clear and direct way that the organization was going to be rebuilt on a single principle, that integrity was not a strategy. It was a foundation. And without it, nothing else held. Reporters wrote about it. Some of them got it right. On Christmas Eve, Vivian drove up to the Ridge Road in a car that Mia had already identified from the window before she even parked. She came in carrying bags of groceries and something wrapped in brown paper under her arm that turned out to be a framed print she'd had made of Mia's captain's hat, whale drawing Gerald's portrait included, matted properly and ready to hang. Mia looked at it for a full 10 seconds. Then she said, "That's museum quality." "I had it professionally printed," Vivian said. "Gerald looks handsome." Gerald is a very distinguished whale. Joel stood in the kitchen doorway watching the 2 of them, and felt something settle in him. Something that had been restless for years. Some deep structural tension in the way he moved through the world. The constant low-grade brace against the next thing going wrong. It didn't disappear. It wasn't magic. But it eased, like a door that had been stuck for a long time, finally swinging the way it was supposed to. Later that night, after Mia was asleep and the dishes were done and the house was quiet around them, he and Vivian sat at the kitchen table with mugs of coffee and the particular comfortable ease of 2 people who have stopped performing for each other. "You know what I keep thinking about?" she said. "What?" "That text," she said. "The one you got from Adrian's guy. Last chance to be smart about this." She looked at her mug. Most people would have taken it, not because they're cowards, just because the math made sense. He was offering you a way out. "He was offering me someone else's cost," Joel said. "That's not a way out." She looked at him. "No," she said. "It isn't." Outside, the coastal wind was doing what it did on winter nights, running along the ridge, pushing at the old windows, testing the seams of things. But the house held the way it always had, because the bones were good, and the man inside it had spent years keeping it together, with not much more than stubbornness and care. And on the refrigerator door, between a drawing of a purple whale and a school lunch menu, there was now a new drawing, one Mia had added that week. In the particular bold, unself-conscious way, she did everything. 3 figures, crayon outlined, standing close together. The tallest one had messy hair and boots. The smallest one had a stuffed bear under her arm. The middle one had a smile that took up most of her face. Under it, in Mia's handwriting, careful and deliberate, and absolutely certain, "Us." That was it. That was the whole story. Not the money, not the headlines, not the corporate war, not even the night a tired Navy father stood in his doorway and refused to move for men who thought they could buy whatever they needed. Just 3 people who had each been alone inside their own kind of storm, and a door that opened at the right moment, and a little girl who gave a stranger her bear in the dark because she'd been raised by a man who believed without complication or exception that kindness was never wasted, not even when the world gave you every reason to think otherwise. Some storms break things, and some storms, if you're lucky enough to be standing in the right place, when they end, bring you exactly what you needed most.